You can create so many different types of marks with acrylic paint. You can have your paintings be very controlled and keep a color confined to specific areas with hard edges, or you can have your paintings be very loose and free. We're going to explore both in our projects. But today we are going to look at different kinds of mark making with your acrylic paint. So I am going to work with yellow, orange, red, and white in these exercises. I've created a page spread where I'm going to do an impressionistic type of painting style where we stipple our way through these dabbing brush strokes. We're going to use a wave, a swirl type brush stroke, really Van Gogh style, think Starry Night. That's what we're going to be doing here. Then we're going to do a radiating technique where we make a halo of light and let that radiate out. And then I'm going to just take everything that we've learned and create a little layered painting right here in the corner, so you get a good idea of the versatility of acrylic paint. So let's get started with our impressionism here. I'm still going to try to do a gradation where I have the darker colors on this side and the lighter colors over here. With our impressionist style, we are going to build up to the darker. So I'm going to start by just adding a little bit of white for my yellow here. And you can see that this is a dabbing technique. A lot of our marks look different too, depending on the brush we choose. There are all types of brushes, round brushes, flat brushes, fan brushes. So I always encourage you guys to try a couple of them out. We've got all different types of brushes in the classroom, so see what different brushes make different marks. So for this one here, with impressionistic style, it's a very loose and free brush stroke. You see I just keep kind of going back into my paints over here. If my colors get a little bit too mixed up, I'll wipe my brush clean and build up. I let this brush stroke move through dabbing. It's also like a stippling technique. You can even do some of these marks a little bit smaller, but the idea is the same, building up while the paint is wet. So I'm just going to start to fill this area with some more orange. You could see that even though I'm going to be blending and I want this area to be mostly red, I bring the orange through and then I add the red on top. This makes sure that we're having some good coverage here. And we have some areas for a little gradation, so it's not an abrupt red. There's a little bit of a red-orange in between as well. In our next technique, we're going to do some swirls here. So I'm going to start out by using my orange, just like my middle here, and create some guides for my swirls. Here, I'll have some of my palette showing. I'm going to go in with my light. So I'm going through with a lighter color right now. I'm going to concentrate on this area as I blend out. You want to concentrate on areas because this paint does dry so fast. Adding my darker color now here while this paint is wet. I feel like it got a little bit too dark in some sections, so I'm going to wipe my brush off real good. Bring in some lighter brush strokes in between here. So for my swirl, you can see that my brush strokes are getting bigger as I'm going onto the outside. As we were getting small inside the swirl, Add some smaller, more detailed. So we want to see a variety of brush strokes, but we also want to see a variety of color here. If I ever feel like it's getting a little bit too, like I don't see lights and darks in there, create a little bit more contrast. You can also wait for this paint to dry and just add a lighter layer on top. That's a nice thing about acrylic paint, is you can utilize the fact that it dries fast to your advantage. See how I brought some more contrast there, which means a difference between my light and my dark, so that it all just doesn't become a middle or too dark. I want to have highlights, I want to have shadows. Alright, so we've learned how to do a gradation where we go from one color to another, but a lot of times in painting we want to do something that has more of a radiating effect, so less of a line where we sweep back and forth and more of a roundness. This is going to be using our brush strokes, but I'm also going to stress this idea of a dry brush technique. We use that a little bit with our sweeping brush, so I'm going to do that again. First, I'm going to start to set up my colors. So just like I have been doing, I'm going to go with a yellow to orange to red. So use the colors that you'd like. You do want to keep your Mr. spray bottle nearby. So I'm going to start out by just like setting up my colors here with a light center. Like I told you guys, I like to keep my yellow with some white. Cleaning my brush off, and I'm gonna add some orange to the outside of this. Now this is a very dramatic effect there. Now look, I am going to take a clean brush and I'm going to just start to clean it up if there's too much paint, with a more round effect. If you feel like your paint's getting a little bit dry, mist it just a little bit to make sure you can still activate it. Clean brush, going back to the center and working my way out. Dry brush, drying my brush. Wiping off my brush, I want to smooth this out. And again, I'm going to keep a small brush on the side and use that just to do this softening. A nice dry brush to soften is so helpful. So keep that off to the side. Now I'm going to use this other brush and add some red. The orange is drying a little bit, so see there, I reactivated it. Dry brush. Alright, so now I'm going to go on to this left side. This paint is definitely dry by now. So I'm going to take that orange, reawaken it, reapply it. So my last section here, I'm just going to do a little bit of a mini painting, have some intention behind my application. So first, I'm going to start with a gradation like we learned about earlier. So in my layers area, I want to show you that acrylic paint dries very fast, and sometimes that can be a frustrating thing, but it also opens up a lot of possibilities of adding layers to your paintings by masking off some areas and revealing colors underneath. So I'm going to do 3 different layers here. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to do a masked off layer, and then I'm going to add on top of that as well. I love to take advantage of the fact that acrylic paint dries so quickly by creating layers. First, you will see me mask off with paper so that some of the underneath gradation is revealed and some is covered. Then I will do it with tape, and then I will add a final layer with adding a botanical illustration. This area is for you to explore and combine the techniques that you've learned with acrylic paint. And there you've got it. We've got 4 different techniques for applying acrylic paint. Remember that acrylic paint, when the pages come together, will stick. So you should put a piece of paper in between this page after you remove the tape to make sure that it doesn't ruin or rip up any of your work.